why do you think you can buy me with these kinds of things? I can't be bought. And the important thing is not these sacrifices that you're bringing, not just ritualistic thing. I want all of you. I don't want this one thing. It's not sacrifices that make you righteous. It's being humble before God and doing the right thing and showing mercy to others in verse 8. This is the key verse to this book. And he says, yet, through all of this, you chose and continue to choose to work evil rather than being good because I'm good to you. And you know, you're looking at this and you can see the case is so strong against these people. There's no way that they can come up with any kind of an answer, any kind of an excuse, any kind of a reason for doing what they did. And I get the idea that after God presents this, that there is no answer. There's nothing you can say. It's just completely silent. And here we see in chapter 7, beginning in verse 1, that Micah begins a reply to God on behalf of Zion, that are Judah and Jerusalem. Beginning in chapter 7, verses 1 through 6. Here Micah says, woe is me, for I am like those who gather summer fruits, like those who glean vintage grapes. There is no cluster to eat of the first ripe fruit for which my soul desires. The faithful man has perished from the earth, and there is no one upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. Every man hunts his brother with a net, that they may successfully do evil with both hands. The prince asks for gifts. The judge seeks a bribe, and the great man utters his evil desire. So they scheme together. The best of them is like a briar. The most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. The day of your watchman and of your punishment comes. Now shall be their perplexity. Do not trust in a friend. Do not put your confidence in a companion. Guard the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your bosom. For son dishonors father, and daughters rise up against their mother. Daughters-in-law against their mothers-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household. Notice in here that Micah, up until this point, had been using third person. But here he switches to a first person. He includes himself with the accused. He's trying to come up with not a defense, but a recognition of where they are and why they need to change. He's like Judah's spokesman at this point. And Homer Haley, the Haley's handbook guy, he says that Micah answers due to an absence of any righteous ones within her borders, and within Judah's borders. So here we see Micah at this point beginning to answer, not as a defense, but just as here's where we are right now. There is a complete breakdown in the social order of the day. What a sad state of affairs that Judah finds itself in. You can't trust the rulers. You can't trust the officials who've been put in places, appointed to look out for the little guy, to make sure that someone's being treated fairly. You can't trust those guys. The appointed officials are going and getting bribes. The judges, you go into a courtroom because you have a case against someone, you can't be certain that the judge is going to judge fairly because the person you're going against may have paid him money to make a decision in their case. Terrible, terrible state of affairs. You know, every once in a while, you might read in the news of an official that is caught and arrested and put on trial because he took a bribe, because he was dealing unfairly, he was betraying the what do they call it? Some of the terms they use, betraying the public confidence. Those kind of things will get an official in trouble. You know, bribery is a really bad thing because if a person will do that, it really makes people mistrust what's going on. And once you lose that trust between a person who's in a position to judge fairly, you know, if you think about a judge, once that trust is gone, you've lost an awful lot. And we have built our nation on saying that when we put people in positions of power, there's an expectation they're going to do things fairly. Doesn't always happen, but for the most part, those guys are doing the right thing for the right reasons. At least I'm hoping they are. Well, that's not the way it was in Judah in the first century. Here you have everything is pretty much in a socially they're in a disorder because nobody can be trusted. You can't trust the guys that you're doing business with, the merchants you go and you buy a loaf of bread, or not a loaf of bread, but a piece of bread, or you measure out wheat. He may have tipped the scales to the point that you're not getting as much as you thought you were because he's using weights that are unfairly tilted in his favor. You can't go to your own friend and trust him to do something because he may be out to cheat you in some way as well. Everybody is out for his own self, and nobody is trying to look out for the best interest of those around them. Agape love is gone. You're not looking out for the best interest of someone else. It's every man for himself at this point. Everything has really broken down completely at this point. No upright person can be found. If you go and you look at Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 1, he was trying to find someone who was a just person. Now this happens closer to the 600 time frame, about 100 years later when Jerusalem is getting ready to be taken over by the Babylonians, destroyed, and the captivity is about to happen. But 100 years later, Jeremiah is also trying to find someone who was just in Jerusalem. Again, justice is perverted, bribery is rampant. It says the best of them is like briars, rough and ugly to deal with. One of my favorite fruits are blackberries. I love blackberries. You know, blackberry cobbler, blackberry pies. Just have them on ice cream or whatever. I love those things. The hard part with those is if you're going to go and you're going to get blackberries, you're going to pick them yourself. They got a lot of briars that you got to go through to get your prize. Well, that's what these guys were. If you're going to go and try to deal with some of these officials, it's going to be hard. They're hard to deal with. They may not be on your side. They may be getting money from someone else to make life hard for you. So it was really a difficult time to get anything done. And those appointed to uphold the law and protect the helpless were the ones committing the worst of crimes. Back where I used to live, not very proud of this, But back where I used to live in North Carolina, it was one of those, it was almost like something you'd see in the movies. We had a sheriff there who had been a sheriff for like 40 years. And the sheriff is supposed to be the guy that upholds the law, that is sworn to protect the innocent, all those things you see on TV about how it's supposed to be and the way it really should be. Unfortunately, this person was probably the largest crook in the county and had been for all those years. He used that position to buy political influence. He used his position to influence other people. The list goes on and on. And he was able to get away with it. He's gone now. But he was able to successfully carry that out for years. And as a result, the county is really still hurting because of the things that he put in place that really kept competition out of the county for so many years. But we see a case of not one person, but just about everybody that are in positions of power or positions of they're supposed to be out protecting you. They're committing the worst of crimes. It's a bad time, terrible time in Judah during this. And this is what's coming up during this trial that God is presenting before the world against his people. These are the people that he has a covenant relationship with. Great men speak openly of the willingness to be bribed. In Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 23 is a similar situation. He says, your princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. Everyone loves bribes and follows after rewards. They do not defend the fatherless, nor does the cause of the widow come before them. You know, widows and orphans are those people in the first century, in the New Testament that we read about that we're supposed to be taken care of. And here saying they don't have any power, they don't have any wealth, so nobody cares about them. They're out to serve themselves. Again, you can't trust your neighbor or your friend to do the right thing. Even the family unit, the basic core family structure has broken down. Paul said in Romans chapter 3 verse 1, there is none righteous, no, not one, would fit with this period of time. Continuing on in Micah chapter 7, beginning at verse 7 through 17, after all these bad things, God here is describing what's coming. But what's coming is not punishment. It's the new covenant that will come. It's the beginning of the church in the first century. Now, these people probably would not have realized anything about this or had any idea of what they're talking about, because when he's using these terms, he's talking about things that they would say, oh, this is talking about our punishment, the people of that day, our punishment, and what's going to happen after we return. Well, there's probably some parallels there, but really the bigger picture is the establishment of the church in the first century. Begin at verse 7. Here Micah says, therefore I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Do not rejoice over me, my enemy. When I fall, I will arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. I will bear the indignation of the Lord, because I have sinned against him, until he pleads my case and executes justice for me. He will bring me forth in the light. I will see his righteousness. Then she who is my enemy will see, and shame will cover her who said to me, where is the Lord your God? My eyes will see her. Now she will be trampled down like mud in the streets. In the day when your walls are to be built, in that day the decree shall go far and wide. In that day they shall come to you from Assyria and the fortified cities, from the fortress to the river, from sea to sea, and mountain to mountain. Yet the land shall be desolate because of those who dwell in it, and for the fruit of their deeds. Shepherd your people with your staff, the flock of your heritage, who dwell solidarily in the woodland, in the midst of Carmel. Let them feed in Bashan and Gilead, as in days of old. As in the days when you came out of the land of Egypt, I will show them wonders. The nations shall see and be ashamed of all their might. They shall put their hands over their mouth, and their ears shall be deaf. They shall lick the dust like the serpent, and they shall crawl from their holes like snakes in the earth. They shall be afraid of the Lord your God, and shall fear because of you. Here's a promise of the final salvation to come, the Christian era. Again, here Micah warns the enemies that even though these people are going to go into captivity, don't rejoice because they're going to come back. God's still going to be with his people during the captivity and after the captivity because he is faithful with his promises. When Jerusalem fell, the nations, the neighbors around there, the neighbors of Judah loved it. They thought it was great. They rejoiced. They were happy to see these people finally taken down. And here Micah saying, don't be doing that because it's only temporary. And it was. And they did come back. And eventually all those nations that did those kind of things, they had their own day when they were also brought down. But when the church came, all these nations that had been enemies to God's people, a lot of these people were making up the first century Christians because they came from all nations all around. He says in that day, verses 10 through 12, he says, beginning of the Christian era, people from all nations will become a part of this new Israel. Now, he's not talking about the land of Israel, not talking about the nation, the physical nation of Israel. He's talking about spiritual Israel. He's talking about the church. And he says that when the church begins, and it's going to be, what's going to happen is people from all nations, even these nations that are right now enemies of Judah, are going to be flowing into this church. And if you go and look in the book of Acts on the day of Pentecost, look at all the nations that were named, and it says that they were people from all over the world basically had come into Jerusalem at that point in time, and they were there at the Pentecost. So all these nations helped begin were there when the church started, and it went from there. It says this earthly Israel. I think Bart talked about this in his Sunday class in Revelation, that their mission, once the church was established, the mission of the earthly Israel was going to be over with. And what was going to happen is, because the people that were left there that refused to become part of the church, those that rejected that and then rebelled against the Romans in AD 70 were in Jerusalem when it was besieged and then destroyed by Rome in AD 70. It says that it will be left desolate, and it's exactly what happened. Jerusalem was left desolate for a very long time after this because of the earthly part. But the spiritual Israel, the church, continues to thrive to today. And before the glorious days to come, in verses 10 through 12, Micah knew that it was going to be a long and difficult path for these people. They're going to be going into captivity within 100 years or less, and it was going to be a hard time for them between that point in time and the time he was living in. And he asked God in verse 14 to shepherd his people and make their journey just a little less difficult, and to bless his people. And then he continues talking about the glorious era to come, the Christian age to come. And then in 18 through 20, we see the greatness of God detailed. Verses 18 through 20 says, Micah says, "Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He does not retain his anger forever, because he delights in mercy. He will again have compassion on us and will subdue our iniquities. You will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea, and you will give truth to Jacob and mercy to Abraham, which you have sworn to our fathers from days old." Here, Micah speaking about what God is going to do for mankind through Christ. He's going to pardon their iniquity. He's going to pass over their transgression. Talking about similar to the Passover that God did when they were still in Egypt. His anger doesn't last forever. He delights in mercy. He will again have compassion upon his people, and he's going to tread our iniquities underfoot and cast our sins into the sea. An image of our sins being carried as far away from us as they can go, so that they won't be on us anymore. And he will keep his promises that he made to the patriarchs of old, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the others. Okay, that's Micah. Next month, I think, Steve, you have the Wednesday class next month. That's right, Nahum. Nahum also is a prophet going to Assyria, just like Jonah did, but it's later, much later than Jonah's time. Thanks so much for your participation, and we'll see you next Wednesday.